Hi, from Antigua, Joanne Hillhouse, wearing my book nerd hat today, not my author hat, because I want to talk about the books that I enjoyed most in 2020. So I only read 18 books in 2020, which is down from the previous year, which was up actually from the year before that. You would think in a year like 2020, when the world stopped, I'd have more time to read, but it actually turned out to be the opposite. So 18 books, which should make it fairly easy to do this top 18 list, but books are not a science, right? You like different books for different reasons: the literary quality, the enjoyment value, connections with the characters, appreciation for the writing style, and also just feeling really connected to it from a historical standpoint or from cultural standpoint. So this is not a judgment on any of the books per se. I mean, it is some kind of anecdotal judgment, but it is mostly just what I liked and why. You can find the full reviews on my blog, johadley.wordpress.com. But number 18 was Buzz and Bingo in the Monster Maze. This is a children's book. I actually put my two children's books were 18 and 17. The other one was Millie's Marvelous Mistakes. Buzz and Bingo in the Monster Maze is an enjoyable book for children. So it being 18 doesn't mean I didn't like it. I enjoyed reading it. It's not for me, it's for kids. Millie's Marvelous Mistakes, that was a copy I got from the author, who I believe is in the Isle of Wight. And it is a fun read. A bit more complex than the Monster Maze one, for older kids, but also with some hidden sort of Easter egg type lessons in it that will challenge you to see how you connect to the character and what you can learn in terms of how to be better behaved. It's a sort of values driven book, and it has a fairy, so that's always fun. As readers of my own books will know, I have a mango tree fairy in one of my books with Grace, so I appreciate it. I think my next one would be 17. My next one would probably be the second Old Guard. The Old Guard graphic novels, which became the Old Guard movie on Netflix, which is one of my favorite movies of the past year. Kind of a happy place for me. I just really love that movie. I don't care what anybody says. And the first Old Guard is higher up my list, but the second one, the sequel, Force Multiplied, was a little further down. Still enjoyed it, but I think I actually came to prefer the characters on screen more than I did the characters in the novel. Sorry, Greg Rucker, but yeah. I think my next one would be, there's a coffee table book called Art Exposed by an Antiguan artist, and it is really visually exciting. This is one of the artists that I interviewed for my Creative Space series, which is an art and culture column that I run in the local newspaper and on my blog, johadley.wordpress.com. And I enjoyed this book. It's obviously visuals primarily, very sort of body positive. A lot of his signatures are there in terms of the sort of hyper color saturation, color contrast, but just so much black, beautifulness, just celebration of blackness and beauty and femininity and different types of bodies. I believe my next one would also be an Antiguan book, which is, I believe, our first graphic novel out of Antigua, August. The artwork is done by one of the artists that I interviewed again for my Creative Space column, Sonalli. The other artist from Art Exposed was Chavel Thomas. Sonalli Andrews was the illustrator for August, and the writer, Tamika Jarvis George, and I appreciate the daring and of, just taking on something new, which, we haven't really seen in terms of our literary culture in Antigua. And just being bold. Tamika is always a bold writer. I do think the story in this case was a bit underdeveloped, but I appreciate it for what it was, and I'm anticipating that there will be more. So that was, I guess, number 14. As you can see, I don't have these in any particular order. I think the next one would probably be, did I say Wartime at Woolworths? That's actually a little further down the list for me. I didn't like it as much as I thought I would. So I guess we can forget the numbers. Lower tier for me would include Wartime at Woolworths, which I thought I would like a lot more than I did, because it is a, sort of home front drama set during World War II, which is always an interesting period. But it had that cozy feel of it's not a Maeve Binchy now, but it had that same kind of cozy feel to it. A lot of characters, a lot of sort of small townness, but at the same time, the big drama of the war going on, and people, dying, and the Blitz, and, having to hunker down to avoid the bombings and so on. So it was interesting, but just not one of my favorites. So I guess Storm. I read the comic. I guess it's the last comic I read this year. Would be Storm, a limited series. Which I actually paused to say rest in peace and to remember someone else who did a Storm limited series, Eric Jerome Dickey, who died this past week, who was someone I knew personally, someone who was a bit of a literary angel in terms of my own journey as a writer, and in terms of some practical help that he gave to me, and just being an all-around good person, and a writer who is a best-selling writer who touched many lives. And I one of my favorite things that he's written was his limited series on Storm, who was, if you know me, is my favorite X-Men character, and I just think she's been underserved by the movies. And if they ever were to adapt a movie, I would actually pick Eric Jerome Dickey's Storm limited series over the one that's on this list. So maybe that'd be a little bit further down. Inferno by Dan Brown. I haven't read Dan Brown in a long time, and the formula is the same. It's globe-trotting. It's trying to figure out a mystery before the world comes crashing down or something. And so it was all right. It is what it is. I haven't been excited by Dan Brown really since Da Vinci Code, which I really enjoyed. But I still enjoy the sort of art history aspect of it. You learn things about artwork and history of the places that he's traveling as a character moves through it, because the character is interested in that stuff, the churches and the artwork, and he's encyclopedic in terms of his knowledge of these things. And this one also had a sort of world-ending stakes because of a virus that had been released, and because of the issues it tried to tackle in terms of overpopulation and so on. I should have ordered these because now I'm not sure where I am. But another book that I read this year that I liked was The Wastelands by Stephen King. That was actually a reread. I read this, I got introduced to the Dark Tower series back in university and fell in love with the series. This past year, I went back and I watched the film that they did with Idris Elba and Matthew McConaughey, and I did not, and directed by Ron Howard. It was alright, but it wasn't the world of the Dark Tower, the grit and the sort of bleakness of that world. I felt they were a little bit too slick. And so revisiting the wasteland was, you could feel the filth and the dust all over you, and the urgency and all of that. And it's one of King's best works, series, in my opinion. The Dark Tower series. I read The Gunslinger, I've read The Drawing of the Three. I think I actually read them out of order. I'm pretty sure I read The Drawing of the Three first. But this one, The Wastelands, I believe comes right after The Drawing of the Three, because you have Jake and you have Eddie and you have Detta. And of course, The Gunslinger. The Old Guard, the original one, the one that would have been the major sort of plot arc of the film. I just love this story. I love that it's these old characters. I mean, they're ancient, but they're young. The oldest one, Andromache, has been alive for something like 6,000 years. Joe and Nikki, who are the lovers, they've been alive since the Crusades. They met during the Crusades, one on one side of that and one on the other side of that, and somehow finding a way to love, and that love enduring through hundreds of years, almost 1,000 years. And being boldly declared. I mean, it's actually groundbreaking for the genre, whether it's comics or action film or action superhero films, to have two gay characters that are out and comfortable and happy, and none of the sort of stereotypes and anything, and none of the sort of wink wink, are they not, nonsense that's really unnecessary. It's just people. And the story has some complexity in terms of the betrayal and how life is not as black and white as all that. So that was really a favorite, both the book and the movie, but especially the first one. I also read The Girl from Everywhere. That's fantasy, time travel sort of thing, but with the unusual element, I suppose, is that you have to have a map of the area that you're going to a specific time. And it's about the yearning to get back to a specific place, and maybe you can't go home again, and you have to be grateful for what you have in the present, where you are, because you might lose it if you keep chasing the past. It also ties in some, subplot Hawaiian independence. So I don't suggest you get your history from it, but it's trying to give you a little bit of history mixed in with the fantasy. And it has a really interesting and engaging main character, teenage girl, who grew up in that world of time travel pirates kind of thing. And it has a love triangle, her first love triangle. It's an interesting book, and of course the revolution. Gwabancheks is a poetry collection by a writer from Dominica, and it is really, really good. It is the first book that I have read chronicling the 2017 season in the Caribbean, which was catastrophic for the entire region, whether it was Irma in Barbuda or Maria in Puerto Rico or BVI or Anguilla. Like so many islands got hit, and one that got hit the hardest was Dominica. And Gwabancheks is about, I'm not even sure if I'm saying the name right, but it's about the before, the during, the after of surviving a hurricane. And having lived through a few hurricanes myself, some of the worst hurricanes that the region has suffered, and sort of that cycle of life and how you learn to adapt, but it's something you can never really adapt to, but you have to live with it, or move, and moving is not that easy. You're talking about climate refugees, and it's very topical in that sense, and where we're going to go, and how we're going to grapple with this going forward. I mean, every hurricane season just keeps getting worse, and Gwabancheks feels like a timestamp, and a very human timestamp of the issues surrounding that, and also the very human cost of it all. I also read An American Marriage by Tiari Jones. That was an Oprah's book club pick. Tiari is one of my favorite writers. I absolutely loved her book, Silver Sparrow. Silver Sparrow is actually still my favorite, but An American Marriage is a book of this particular moment in a very real way. It has to do with a character wrongfully accused, caught up in the prison industrial complex and trying to fight his way out of it and get back to his family, and it's about the strain that it puts on his relationship. And it's also about the people outside who are trying to be there but also move on with their lives, and how that can come to a head in a very real way. So it's a domestic drama in that sense. It's a romance, but it's also about the injustices of the system that keeps its boot kneel on the neck of black people. So boot kneel keeps its boot or its knee. Anyway, the point is, black people feeling the squeeze, and no more so than in a book like An American Marriage. Another one that I'm just hoping I'm not forgetting anything. Black Brother by Joel Parker Rhodes. That's a young adult novel. About a young man. It's actually quite similar in that sense to The Hate You Give by Andrew Thomas, because it's about a young man and his brother both go to private school and dealing with issues of race and fitting in and finding your way. One is dark skinned, one is very, very white. So, which is a reality in a lot of black families. So you have issues of colorism, which is a central theme as well in my book, Musical Youth, very much a central theme here. And also similar to Musical Youth, the main character, finding his way through finding something that he's passionate about. In this particular case, it's I want to say karate, but I could be wrong about that. But it's one of those, sports where you learn to defend yourself and to stand up for yourself and to compete and all of that. So really, it was perhaps my quickest read of the year. I read it off overnight. I mean, yes, it was an audiobook that I got from the author, but even so, audiobooks are actually a challenge for me. I take longer to read them than regular books, so it's not that it's an audiobook that made it finish fast. It finished fast because it's a really engaging book with really compelling characters and really timely messages. So, Black Brother. I also read this year Graybarn Rising, which is by Trinidad author Derry Sandy. And it has one of my favorite books of the year, top 3. So I hope I'm not forgetting anything that's further down the list, because I think I'm into the top 3 now. But this one was about like a secret order and a veil between the natural and the supernatural world, but it draws on all the lore of Caribbean supernatural existence, the Sukuya, the Lucaru, all of those, the Jabless, and all of the things that was sort of part of my growing up, in the Caribbean. And in in this book, they're real, and the veil is thinning out, and they're kind of coming over into our world. And there's this order that is tasked, kind of like the Talamasca in the Anne Rice novels, with protecting the world. Well, Talamasca more watches, but this order is tasked with protecting the world, and they are overwhelmed. And there's a big bad, and it's just a lot of Caribbean lore, and it was just so much fun. Every time you think, oh, you've seen, okay, well, you saw a book with one. Oh, no, it has this other one, this other one, this other one. It was like a carnival for me. I really, really enjoyed it. And the stakes were high, and the tension and the action, lots of action. Action, I find, is not as easy to write as people think, and this author did a really good job with it. But at the same time, you are invested in the action, and you feel the stakes because you care about the characters. And then I come to what I think is my second favorite book of the year, The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. And this book actually makes me kind of mad because I want to drop everything and just read the whole series. But life doesn't work like that. I don't have time to drop everything and read the whole series, but I want to because it is so good. It is so good. It is fantasy. She's also a Black author, African American, I believe, and she's an award-winning fantasy author. And you don't see a lot of diversity in that world, and she kind of puts her foot in it, in a very real and impactful way. It's very dystopic in terms of, what the characters are going through, and there's also this sense of dealing with various sort of political issues in terms of people and governments and how they control the people and sort of subvert the will of the people and do damage in those ways. But it has some very engaging, again, young female characters, strong voices, and love and despair and loss, and it's just a whole potpourri of feelings and journeying. And you kind of feel like when you get to the end you kind of just want to flip over to the next book, which I will eventually, but the 5th season is really amazing. That's all I'll say about that. I guess my favorite book of the year, if I'm not forgetting anything, is a book I first read when I was a teenager. And this is the book I think that flipped the switch in my mind, because growing up in the Caribbean, you learn a lot about the slave trade and a lot about the plantation economies, and you learn a lot of dates and how the system worked and so on. This was the first book I felt that showed me the humanity of my people who had endured that darkest period in human history. The 400 or so years of the transatlantic empire slave trade. But this book, although it's a slave narrative, is a post-slave narrative because it begins right at the end of slavery in Antigua, 1834. And it begins with a family trying to find the daughter who had been sold away and branded. And but it's to shoot hard labor is the complete life almost of an Antiguan working man. So it's Antigua's history through his lived history. And this book details some of the darkest aspects of it post-slavery to show that freedom didn't mean that they were free. They were still under the jurisdiction of whiteness in every sense of the word. Their lives and deaths didn't mean anything. And then it also showed how they took power, how they fought to become more recognized for their humanity and so on. And I actually ended up reading this book when I was invited to be a part of a book club discussion of it on local radio. They were doing a month-long book club discussion, and I was supposed to participate in one episode, and I said, okay, I'll read the parts for my episode, and I ended up reading the whole thing over the course of the month. In the summer, right while the whole Black Lives Matter thing was exploding, so it just felt very much like the book I needed to be reading right then. And then I ended up writing about it for Black Fun Fact Friday on another blog. I'll put the link in the description. But it's just a reminder that we have come a long way and we have many rivers still to cross, and that in terms of that experience across all of the Americas, we have endured it. The Caribbean, Latin America, USA, wherever Black people were taken and enslaved and then had to rebuild and build a life. Books like these, stories like these are important for us to understand where we came from, and so that's why it's at the top of my list. Also because it was a book that humanized the experience for me and kind of defined my relationship with that past as someone who considers himself to be part of that journey, part of that legacy. I stand on their shoulders. I wouldn't be here if they hadn't survived that. So that's why To Shoot Hard Labor, which came out in 1986, is my number one. And none of these books I don't think came out this year. So, came out in 2020. I guess that's kind of, because my TBR is so deep, it takes me a while to get to the new books, but hopefully I'll do better in 2021. I hope everyone out there is being good, and it's been a rough year, but we have books, and sometimes they allow us to get away for a little while and be somewhere else and also learn something more about where we are. So enjoy. I hope you check out these books and my books as well. This is Jo Hadley, Joanne Hillhouse in Antigua, blogger and books, book chat Unscripted. Thanks for listening.